Test, test. Test, test. So what I'm going to do is press this like that, and then like this. So you can see that. And at the same time, I'm going to do this. So when I do that, I didn't. Okay. So ready? Test, test. So when you heard it, did you see that way? No, I didn't. No, I didn't move the slide. I just moved this bigger. Test, test. Do it and then move. Because maybe maybe this doesn't display for them. Test, test.
Mic check.
Hey, folks, just a couple more minutes. There's still some people parking and are going to come in, then we'll get started. Just a couple more minutes, so enjoy your sandwiches. We're kind of on Fallbrook time right now. Now you're live.
Thank you for coming, everyone. It's a crowded room tonight. I'd first like to introduce our board president, Jennifer DeMeo, and Hayden Hamilton, the board president of Rainbow Municipal Water District. Welcome.
Hello, everybody. Welcome. Glad you guys were able to come out tonight. I'm Jennifer DeMeo. As Noel said, I'm the board president currently of the Fallbrook Public Utility District. This really important topic called detachment that can be so confusing. And why we're pursuing it will be presented tonight. Both our board of directors at FPUD and the board of directors for Rainbow Municipal Water District support it, and you're going to hear why and what it means for our agencies and the process. Some of you may have been here for our last town hall. I'm glad you came back to get an update. And not standing here next to me, Hayden is standing here next to me. And he is the board president of Rainbow. I'll have him say a few words. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you, Jennifer. As she indicated, my name is Hayden Hamilton. I'm the president of the Rainbow Municipal Water District Board of Directors. As Jennifer alluded to, our two districts are seeking to change our water suppliers from the San Diego County Water Authority to the Eastern Municipal District, where we expect to save you, the ratepayers, millions of dollars a year. That's the whole thing that is driving that from our perspective. While both our boards support this move, we can't make this decision unilaterally. There is a process for this. We have submitted applications to the Local Agency Formation Commission, or LAFCO. For short, LAFCO is the agency made up of San Diego County elected and appointed officials who decide issues involving jurisdictional boundaries and other matters within the county. If approved, LAFCO will define the conditions for detachment, if any. Should LAFCO approve the change in water suppliers, it will be presented to the voters in our service areas for confirmation. You have the last say. So you'll be able to understand once we get there exactly what is being proposed. Joining us this evening to explain LAFCO's review process is LAFCO Executive Director Keene Simons. We appreciate Keene for taking time out of his day to come all the way up here from San Diego to meet with you in person. As he said before the meeting, boy, it's a lot further than I thought. FPUD General Manager Jack Beebe and Rainbow General Manager Tom Kennedy will present additional information about the detachment. And we also have a presentation from Jonathan Rivas, an economist who has studied the costs we pay for water and compared them to the benefits our region receives. We also want to hear from you. So we'll have ample time for questions and answers. Thank you very much. And I'll turn the floor over to Noel. We have a number of Rainbow board members. I'm sure I don't know all of yours. If you'll raise your hand, staying in the back is Pam Moss, Director Pam Moss in the white blouse. And next to her in the cap is Miguel Gasca. And our full board is here. In the sweater holding his hand up is Director Mack. And Bill Stewart is newly appointed to fill an open term that came about in just the last month or so. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'd also like to acknowledge the Fallbrook Public Utility District board members who are here. We have Don McDougall. We also have Charlie Walk, and we also have Dave Baxter. And I'd like to say a special thanks to Dave Baxter because so many of you who filled out the little yellow sticky note for the drawing at the end. Dave Baxter and his wife Stephanie have donated those Protea plants for us for the giveaway at the end of the evening. But next, I'd like to invite up our speakers, Andy Vanderlyn. He's the chairman of the LAFCO board. And Keen Simmons, he's the executive officer. We also have Adam Wilson, a consultant, and Priscilla Allen, project manager.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Is Fallbrook Public Utility District going to declare a board meeting?
We're not discussing any board items.
Oh, okay. All right. My name is Andy Vanderlaan. Thank you for coming to my memorial dinner. Appreciate it. Box lunch as it is, but it's good anyway. I came into Fallbrook in 1988. I was the fire chief there for 32 years. So I remember back when we could have had a dam here, except for the least vario bird that shut it all down. We wouldn't be talking about so much delicacy, if you will, or need for water. We'd be set at that point. Town would have probably been a little busier because we had fishermen and all that. But anyway, so once again, I'm chair of the Cal or San Diego LAFCO. There are 8 voting members on the commission, 2 supervisors, 2 from cities, 1 from San Diego City. They have their own vote. And there's a public member and what's the other one I'm forgetting? Oh, 2 special districts members. They're all of the city, the district, and of course the supervisors are all elected. As a public member, I'm appointed by the commission itself. I'm in my, I think, 24th year of serving on the commission. We've seen some proposals go through. This is probably one of the most interesting and most important that we've seen. It has impacts all the way up and down. My wife said, "Who's affected?" I said, "Just about everyone. You're talking about special district. You're talking about our city and county." So I want you to be assured that I've served on other commissions as well, but LAFCO is the most effective and the most fair of all commissions. It operates better. You don't have to take my word for it. You can even ask the 2 district representatives. So be prepared to come to the meeting. When's our next meeting? December what?
December 6th will be our next meeting. Although I'll talk a little bit, or Adam will talk a little bit more about specific timelines on this.
Okay. So December 6th, mark that on your calendar. It is a infamous date, I guess. And I want to also assure you that besides being an open and fair process, we have, I think, the best. There are 48 LAFCOs in the state. Each state has one. I believe we have the best staff, the best executive officer of all of them, and you'll see that in Keen's report tonight, and you'll also see it if we have any staff work come in. Our 2 staff members, or more than that, would you stand up, please? Two. Okay. All right. Okay, well, welcome. All right, so anyway, how can you comment on the issue? You can email to the office and go off the LAFCO website, or you can come to the meeting on December 6th. We're now back in. We're still doing the hybrid meeting.
We are.
And most of the commissioners are trying to make it to the face-to-face meeting, but you can still come online. You can also catch the meeting itself on Zoom. So let's see, I think that's, let me go ahead and introduce our commissioners. They're all engaged. It's amazing with this process. Like I said, I've served on many committees and boards and all of that, but the people that serve on LAFCO are there for a reason. Because we do a lot of things. You don't want to see it as in the underground, if you will. Not the meetings are open, of course, but a lot of things that we do that you don't even notice. But this is one, and I really appreciate. In all my time here in Fallbrook, I've always been impressed by the community involvement. You're not only actively involved and do things in the newspaper and other kinds of things, but you also put your feet where your mouth is, and you come to meetings and you make noise. And that's what LAFCO wants to hear. We want to get it all vetted because it is, once again, it's a very difficult process, and probably regardless of the outcome, it probably will not happen again. So we have from the county, we have Jim Desmond, also from the county, Nora Vargas. From Vista Water District, we have Joe McKinney and Bruce Ellis from the districts. Mary Zealous, city member from Chula Vista, and Paul McManor, yeah, something like that. He's from Escondido. And Chris Kate is our San Diego City appointed members. Once again, I'm Andy Vanderland, public member. If you have any questions, I don't know whether I'll be able to answer them or not, but I'll try. And this is Keen.
Hello, hello. Oh, very good. So as Chair Vanderland mentioned, my name's Keen Simons. I'm the executive officer for San Diego LAFCO, joined by Adam Wilson, our consultant, who is spending most of his time with LAFCO working on this very important project. And then, as mentioned, I think by Tom in a bit, Priscilla Allen, who's actually our project manager for this proposals, will be here shortly. But what I want to do is give you 15 great minutes. Okay, in that 15 minutes, I'm going to let you know where we are in processing these proposals. What are the key policy issues that have kind of illuminated themselves and have become really part of the fabric in a radar for LAFCO, how they affect all of you in this room, and then talk a little bit about specific next steps. But first, I think Hayden and Jen mentioned, there's this LAFCO in every county. We're in the business of overseeing boundaries, but let's just quickly hit and drill down on why we do that. And we do that because the legislature is in the business through LAFCOs of making sure that cities and special districts, boundaries and service areas all sync up to some notion of orderly growth. I say notion because every county in California has a different construct of what orderly growth in efficient services is. Before coming down to San Diego, I was in the Bay Area, and I can assure you what the good people of Marin, the good people of Napa and San Francisco view as orderly growth may be different than our friends here in San Diego or Los Angeles or vice versa. So again, the idea is every proposal that we process, at the end of the day, we're trying to make sense of, is it orderly, is it efficient, and is it fair? I'm going to come back to that comment of fairness in just a bit. Back in July of this year, myself and Priscilla Allen did show up, albeit late. Don't think poorly of her for that reason. But nevertheless, this is our project manager on the proposal. In July, we came to you and we said, we're just about starting really the nuts and bolts of an ad hoc committee that the LAFCO Commission had formed to look at some of the specific issues. At the time, we were somewhat vague on what exactly the ad hoc committee was really going to be up to. Well, I can report now after about 5 months of several meetings, thousands of papers going back and forth, I can illuminate that there are 3 topics that have come to the forefront and by way of our own consultant, Michael Hanneman, and you're gonna hear that name a lot tonight, Michael Hanneman, who's our consultant on this project. We have made a tremendous amount of progress, and my guess is within the next 30 to 60 days, some substantive conclusions are going to be out there for the public to really digest as we start to pivot towards Andy and the other 7 voting members of LAFCO, who probably will start taking this item up in some substantive way as early as March or April of 2023. 22. Sorry. I just was playing with Tom's cardiac response on that. So what are the 3 issues that we're dealing with right now that are of importance to you? And as Andy said, just about everyone else in San Diego County, because guess what? The proposal that Hayden noted, right? Just switching wholesale providers going from County Water Authority to Eastern, it's a big deal. And it's a big deal to a lot of people in this county. But the first core issue that the ad hoc committee has dived into is, hey, what's the water reliability difference between your baseline situation of being a member of County Water Authority versus going over to Eastern Municipal Water District? Why is that important to LAFCO? Well, because again, it goes into the idea of LAFCO's task and state statute is to make sure that municipal services are primed and calibrated to meet community needs now and going forward. So that's topic one. I'm going to go into some of the working conclusions in a bit, but just make sure that I get the other two on the radar. The second key topic that we're diving into right now is this idea of rate impacts, right? I think Tom, or maybe it was Jen or Hayden, said, hey, from your perspective at Fallbrook and Rainbow, you're looking at saving some millions of dollars each year in making this transition. Fair enough. LAFCO's in the business of verifying that number, but we're also interested in verifying what would be the impact to the other 22 member agencies in San Diego County that are part of the County Water Authority. Going to come back to the little details on that in a second. And the third, and finally, the issue that the ad hoc committee is diving into by way of our consultant, Michael Hanneman, is if LAFCO sees it right to allow and say yes to Fallbrook and Rainbow leaving the Water Authority and annexing into Eastern, would it be appropriate for these districts to pay an exit fee or departure fee, some type of true up cost to help make the County Water Authority in its 1.7 million resident / customers somewhat whole? So those are the three topics that we've been focusing on. Now let's talk about what we have to date learned and or identified in this process. And what I'm referencing is about a month ago, our consultant, Michael Hanneman, issued a draft report. In that report are conclusions that I'm going to briefly cover. I would encourage all of you to go to the LAFCO website at www.sdlafco.org, and you can look at the full report in its entirety on your own, and look at those thousands of pages of rebuttal that Tom, Jack, and others have contributed to the reading of Mr. Adam Wilson in the front row. But specifically on the topic of water reliability, what Professor Hanneman has tentatively concluded in this draft report is that there is a difference in water reliability between the County Water Authority and Eastern, which essentially is the Metropolitan Water District of Southern California. The professor, however, has not concluded whether or not that difference is significant or substantive to LAFCO. That is what he is drilling down right now on. I can assure you that the key issues on this topic come down to this concept of drought proofing, right? It just so happens we have a drought right now to help us play this out in real time. The professor's comments are, at least in draft form, the Water Authority has grandfathered rights to water from Imperial County. And by virtue of this grandfathered rights, which was part of a contract arrangement, yes, the Water Authority has more reliable supplies, but again, has not deduced for our purposes at LAFCO whether it's substantive. And there's, again, a whole list of things that come from that comment one way or the other. I would encourage you to look at the details and dependencies on that topic. However, we're going to come back to why the Imperial Water District water is significant in terms of a reliability boost for County Water Authority, because it affects how we might look at a departure fee. But second, the topic of water rates. Well, as again, Tom and Jack and others for Fallbrook and Rainbow have noted, yes, if you were to leave the Water Authority, you would likely save in the 7 digits for customers here by making that switch. What our professor has deduced, or at least determined as to a reasonable projection, is that the impact on the other 22 member agencies can range between 16 million and 33 million a year. Right now, if we did our own math on that number, the impact to individual ratepayers within the 22 member agencies would start off at something about $5 a month. Maybe doesn't seem like a lot, But again, for the others in San Diego County, $5 a month, that adds up. Now, Jack and Tom will quickly say that's the math on that is funny, and their math shows the impact is more like 60 cents per month. So we have on one extreme perhaps 60 cents a month, to the other maybe $5 a month of a rate impact to other customers in San Diego County. So our job at LAFCO through the professor is to drill down and come up with what we think is a reasonable estimate. But those are the bookmarks that we're working with right now. And then finally, when it comes to this idea of a potential exit fee, I know that Fallbrook and Rainbow have appropriately and understandably pointed out that there's no such thing or contemplation of a departure fee in the County Water Authority Act. That is true. However, in LAFCO law, we could certainly and very well may want to impose a condition of an exit fee. And the idea behind an exit fee would be if we think that there is money that needs to be reallocated to the water authority to make the authority whole for some amount of time as they transition to this new reality of potentially having two less customers or member agencies, well, then that's something that we should give long and hard thought to. The professor, and based on deciding or determining that the key difference between the water authority and Eastern in terms of reliability, and I talked about this earlier, is this contract that guarantees the water authority senior rights to the Colorado River by way of Imperial. Well, based on the cost of that Imperial County agreement and apportioning it to Fallbrook and Rainbow, the professor has come up with a rough number. It's rough, and so it needs smoothing. It needs smoothing, but the number itself goes upwards to about $80 million. That would be then need to be paid back to the water authority in some notional time period. Now, Fallbrook and Rainbow have understandably provided us a number of written correspondence to say that number is wrong, and I'll let them talk to it. The key here is we have at least some numbers out on the table so everyone is aware of what people are discussing. I can assure you, while Jack and Tom think that 80 million number is way out of proportion, our friends at the Water Authority equally think that number is way out of proportion and needs to be a lot higher. Our task at LAFCO is to come up with an independent judgment call. We're using Professor Michael Hanneman to help us get to that reasonable decision point through this 10-member ad hoc committee. This ad hoc committee has a meeting coming up, whether it be, and I'll leave Adam to fill in the details, whether it be in December or January, but there is a seminal meeting coming up of this ad hoc committee where they're going to receive a final report from Michael Hanneman, and they are going to weigh in on whether they believe that the information in that document is appropriate and gives LAFCO a baseline of good information to make a determination. Who makes the ultimate determination? It's not staff, it's Andy and the other 7 commissioners on LAFCO. As mentioned earlier, if LAFCO were to say yes to this proposal, well, it doesn't mean it happens. It means that everyone, certainly in this room, who's a voter of Fallbrook and Rainbow would ultimately get to say yes or no to it. I will share with you that there is a request on the table from the Water Authority that will be something that we will also have to address at LAFCO, which is their desire, should LAFCO approve this proposal or proposals, that it not that the vote not be limited to just Fallbrook and Rainbow, that it be extended out to all 22 member agencies residents. So essentially a countywide vote. Now, it may be humorous or maybe so pie in the sky, but that is a request that LAFCO has to give consideration to. And we're so focused in on these number issues We're not even going there right now. That all said, this is the opportunity for everyone in this room and in the virtual world to be aware of what LAFCO is doing. What are these 3 policy issues that are firmly on our mind right now? And start to develop some thought as to participating in the process at LAFCO, whether it's through our next ad hoc committee meeting. And certainly as we pivot and bring these items to the commission as part of probably more than one notice public hearing. As I kind of wrap up my comments, and I think I'm getting close to minute 15, there's one other but certainly related action that we're up to at San Diego LAFCO that ties into this reorganization or reorganization proposals. We are working on a study, we call it a municipal service review, that independently looks at all of your local service providers here in the Fallbrook Rainbow region. So that certainly includes Fallbrook PUD, Rainbow Municipal Water District, also includes North County Fire in a county service area. The reason I'm bringing this up, because we are bringing that document to the commission in draft form on December 6th. That document under state statute has to be done and inform, among other things, the boundary lines that would need to be moved in order to accommodate the requests that Fallbrook and Rainbow have made. One of the key issues that we deal with in the service review is our independent take on financial solvency and the ability to provide services now and going forward. I certainly would encourage those interested to also pay attention to that document, to provide comments as you see fit. And with that, Adam is here to talk if there are questions specific to the ad hoc committee and the things that they are going through. Priscilla can speak to the municipal service review that we're preparing, and I can certainly help or avoid as best I can. But I want to thank all of you for being in attendance. We're listening to everything we hear. So with that, I'm going to pass this back to Noel, and I suppose we're going to hear first from Tom and Jack, and then maybe some questions and answers.
Is Adam coming up first or?
Available for questions.
Okay, good. All right, so before we invite our 2 general managers up to speak on this issue, we'd like to show a short video. So just bear with us for a minute while we pull it up.
At Rainbow Municipal Water District and Fallbrook Public Utility District, we are working together to serve our communities. Have you noticed the cost of water going up? Our agencies currently buy our water from the San Diego County Water Authority. Under SDCWA, ratepayers in Fallbrook and Rainbow are paying for pipelines and facilities down south that we don't benefit from. The law that created SDCWA gives us the right to detach. And as it turns out, Fallbrook and Rainbow have connections that can be served by a different wholesaler, Eastern Municipal Water District. Eastern's cost for the same water is lower than SDCWA. We'll save money on water costs, which will provide the opportunity for Fallbrook and Rainbow to halt rate increases. And the water supply from Eastern will be just as reliable as it is from SDCWA. So we have started the process to part ways with SDCWA and begin purchasing our water from Eastern. This process is called detachment. And if approved, it will ultimately be subject to a vote of the residents of Fallbrook and Rainbow. Detachment, a reliable supply of water at a lower cost.
Okay, and next I'd like to introduce Jack Beebe, the General Manager of Fallbrook Public Utility District, and Tom Kennedy from Rainbow.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and go first. If we bring up the presentation, I really appreciate LAFCO being here. As you're going to hear, we have a different perspective on some of these things. So part of what we're talking about is, as Keen indicated, there is an act. There's a County Water Authority Act that described when Fallbrook was an original member of the San Diego County Water Authority. When we joined, we agreed to conditions that are in the act that basically says if you want to leave, your ratepayers get to vote on it. And there is property tax that you're paying right now that goes to the water authority. And the conditions, as we understand them from that act, are that property tax would continue to go to them for a while. What LAFCO is involved in is saying, is that fair? Essentially, that's LAFCO has the ability to impose additional terms and conditions. If they felt like, hey, that act really isn't fair for the ratepayers of Fallbrook and Rainbow, they're getting a great deal in the water authority, and remember, remaining member agencies are getting a bad deal. And so our perspective is that what has been going on is not really been that fair for Fallbrook and Rainbow ratepayers. So the water authority, we're not saying their rates are illegal. They have legal rates, but they have what they're called postage stamp rates. You'll hear that term. Well, with those postage stamp rates, those of us that are up at the very north end of the system, right, and even Fallbrook ratepayers that actually right now don't use any of the water authority infrastructure are still paying into facilities in San Diego County. And we have been since we joined. And so our perspective is a little different that says, hey, yeah, there is some cost savings to us to leave. And that does mean others have to pay more, but they're now paying their true cost of water and we're paying our true cost of water. So it's a difference of perspective. And in the end, right, like Keen's saying, the executive officer staff will have a recommendation and the commission will get to make a decision. But we're hopeful that some of that will get through in the report that goes to the commission. So if we go to the next slide. So just to give you some background, most of you hopefully know which district you're in. Fallbrook Public Utility District is basically downtown in Duluth. Rainbow surrounds us. They go out to the freeway down south into Bonsall, up in the Rainbow area. They're about twice our size, similar ratepayers. They've retained more agriculture than us so far, so they're still about 65%. We used to be at about 70. We're down to about 30% right now in agriculture. So we've seen a very steep decline. So is Rainbow. It's just they've had fewer people. But both of us have seen that. And, both of those impacts, not just agriculture, but for here residential, because we have higher water use, that those rates, those postage stamp rates hit us harder because we're paying for those on our water use. So we've really seen that cost differential in a bigger way than a lot of other people. And what I'm going to talk about is there's really two reasons we're talking about pursuing these, and I'll go through those. So if we go through the next slide. So one of the main reasons we're different and why we're talking about something that really is unique to Fallbrook and Rainbow is that we're in a location in the water authority that's unique. And so, we right now are using imported water and local water. Let's go to the next slide. But what makes us unique is that in the water authority system, the pipelines that come from Metropolitan, so the water authority buys their water from Metropolitan, we buy our water from the water authority. We're paying all these people along the way. That's part of what you see in your cost of water. What makes us unique is we don't actually have to use their infrastructure. So we can connect directly to Met's pipelines. So we can actually go and theoretically, we could buy that water from Met, but as complicated as this process is, us trying to become a direct Met member agency would be a whole nother level of complexity. And so we are not pursuing that. But the next best thing is we can essentially do something similar, but connect to Eastern. And there's some other benefits of us being an Eastern member. But what it allows us to do is basically, instead of paying the water authority for infrastructure we're not using, we can go directly off those Met pipelines. Now, why didn't we do this 60 years ago? Maybe a question. Well, Eastern didn't exist in the way it does back then, right? So things have changed. And I'd say from sort of a LAFCO perspective, if you were looking at this on a blank sheet of paper today and said, well, what agencies should go with the water authority and what agencies would go with other member agencies? Well, the county line isn't really the dividing point. It's the pipeline. Who needs the water authority pipeline? Who doesn't? Right. And so the fact that we're in a location where, hey, we don't need this pipeline, we don't need that infrastructure, to us makes more sense. That it's a better fit. Eastern's a better fit for the Fallbrook and Rainbow ratepayers. You go to the next. So, why are we looking to leave? Now, there's been some argument. The consultant didn't really like the analysis. There was an economist that did an analysis that said, hey, if you look at how the rates are and how that got allocated. That ended up being about $50 million that we paid that we didn't get back over the last decade. You can argue about the methodology and number, but there is a number, right? So there is a number that these ratepayers, that your money you've paid is gone into all that infrastructure, right? So Fallbrook residents that have been a member since the 40s, right? Some amount of money you've been paying is to repair, build pipelines, tanks, storage facilities that you've never used, right? And that's because we remember the water authority. Some of your rates went to that. So you can argue what the time horizon and what that number is, but you can't argue that there is some number. There's some value you've invested into those assets. All of you are aware, probably the last time we had this many people in this room was our last rate increase. I fortunately was the acting general manager because the other one wisely retired right before that. You know, we don't want to do that again. None of us do. I don't want to. Our board members don't want to. If we stay with the water authority, they're looking at 7 to 9% increases over the next 5 years. If we get 7 to 9% increases, that means we have to do something similar on our rates. Now, Fallbrook, we're a little fortunate in that we just got a local water supply that's going to buffer some of that. Rainbow's 100% dependent on that. So if your biggest cost goes up 7 to 9%, there's no margin there. That's our biggest cost. You can't absorb that. And so that's one of the main reasons is we know in this community, cost of water is an issue. Right? If you go into city of San Diego, you might hear people complain, but if you ask them top 5 issues, cost of water is probably not on that slate. If you come up into Fallbrook and Rainbow, it's on there because people use more water here and that water bill part has gotten much more expensive and you've noticed it. It's not a small number, it's a big number. We know that, right? And that's part of why we're looking to do this. So first reason I talked about is location and infrastructure. That's the first reason we're looking at doing this. The other is cost of water. We recognize that's an issue. You know, this last 8% increase, doing that again the next 5 years is going to be problematic for all of us, for me, for our board, for the community. On top of that, you know, they have a little different perspective about costs and what they'll call sort of reliability investments. When we look at reliability investments, if you look at the last couple droughts, which Keen talked about, there would have been no difference for Fallbrook and Rainbow ratepayers if we were with the Water Authority or Eastern, right? And part of that has to do, again, with the nature of our water use, most of it being outdoors, that we're always asked to conserve during droughts. The state looks at us and says, hey, you guys have a lot of outdoor use, you need to conserve. So some of these investments that may make more sense to areas that have biotech, you know, a lot of hotels, heavy industry, a lot of commercial, just don't pan out the same way for us. So we pay for them, but we generally don't get the same benefit. And that is our perspective, Tom and I as general managers, that we feel needs to be considered in this. And they are, for example, the water authorities right now pursuing a project that would build their own parallel Colorado River aqueduct to get this water, the IID transfer water, which basically just says we're higher priority than Met. If the drought gets so bad that, you know, Met doesn't have enough water, that position is that we'll be fine, that Fallbrook and Rainbow would be able to just kind of water outdoors. Why, you know, City of Hollywood, they have to shut down, they don't have any water. And that reality doesn't make sense to us. That's not going to happen. We're going to be asked to conserve. So investments like this don't make sense to us. And then the other thing is, you know, we're really looking at it is there's a process outlined in the act. We all agreed to the act. We think that's fair. It's more than fair from our perspective, right? You're leaving those investments behind. The idea of you having to then also pay more money to help them just doesn't make sense to us. It's not in the act. We don't think that's fair. So that's our perspective on it. And from us, you know, Fallbrook, you know, especially the water we're getting is the same water. There's this paper allocation. They'll talk about paper senior rights of this IID supply. It's no different in the actual water you're getting. It's a paper allocation under theoretical situation that, you know, we don't see the cost and benefit on that. And as Keen mentioned, ultimately, all of you that are interested in it, there's a very long report on it. And our, ask, or what we're going to get out of this is you to be able to vote on that. Is this worth it? Is the savings worth any theoretical decrease in this sort of paper reliability? We go to the next one. So second item that I talked about, cost, and this is really the driver. So you may also ask, why did you not do anything till now, right? So if, this issue's been out there. Why hasn't Fallbrook and Rainbow tried to do something 40 years ago, right? Or 30 years ago? The reason for it is this cost differential didn't really become that significant until the last couple decades. And some of it has to do with some of the investments they've made. So the QSA supplies is part of that. Some of these water supply investments that we think cost us more than the benefit we receive from them. The desal plant is another. That water doesn't actually make it to Fallbrook, but it is something we pay for. That drives this differential, and it's gotten to be significant. So that's really what's driving this, is the fact that for Fallbrook right now, if we switched from the Water Authority to Eastern, we wouldn't build anything. We wouldn't change anything. We wouldn't operate differently in any way, right? We would be getting the exact same supplies from the same pipelines. The only difference is that differential, right, of being able to pay significantly less on water. So that's really the second driver. So infrastructure, like we said, hey, this makes sense from an infrastructure. And second is cost. This cost that we're paying now just doesn't pencil out for the community of Fallbrook and Rainbow from our perspective and our board's perspective. So if we go to the next one, and then. So everyone else who lives in this area is well understands how important this is. Is my voice hoarse? I think it's just my voice.
Almost time to hand over the mic.
Yeah, I got one more and then I'll go. So the last, I've actually had a lot of strangely for Fallbrook, a number of media events lately, not just on this. So I guess I've worn my voice out. So the other part of this that everyone's aware of is the impact on agriculture in the community. And I talked about, Fallbrook Public Utility District, we used to sell about 20,000 acre feet of water. We're down around 8,000. That's how much water we sold in the 50s and 60s, right? So our water demands have dropped significantly. What's the big driver behind that for us? Avocados took off here in the 40s. Right. And that's when demands really picked up, and they've been dropping significantly. Right now, if you talk to one of our directors, Charlie Walk, he'll tell you there's ways to still make it work on avocados, but it takes a big reinvestment. So a lot of these older groves really, they can't keep it going with the cost of water. It's really driving that out. And so we've lost a lot of acreage, a lot of trees. That's a big driver of our economy up here. It's also important, our water system runs better when we sell more water, right? So we've got a system that was designed to sell 20,000 acre feet of water a year. It's not great if we're going to end up at 5,000 acre feet of water a year. That's not a great situation because we have this big system, not that many users. So it's important to us for that agriculture to remain in Fallbrook. And in our community, it's not as if out in Duluth that agriculture goes away and you're going to get housing developments or something to replace it. That's not, it's just, there's nothing, right? So that's really the struggle is keeping that is really important for this community. So a significant number of jobs, groves, agriculture is not only a benefit to Fallbrook and Rainbow, but the region. And I think that's another perspective here is that the importance of affordable water is more important to Fallbrook and Rainbow than it is for Fallbrook and Rainbow to be members of the Water Authority. So there's better benefit to the county for us to be sustainable, not only agriculture, but residential and things to be, cost effective. People don't move here to live on an acre of rocks, right? You want to be able to afford to have some landscaping. So that's important for this community. There's other, the character of the community, carbon capture has been, mentioned. That's a county priority. Los Avocados has a big impact on that as well. So I'm going to turn it over to Tom as I lose my voice, I guess, anyway.
Thanks, Jack. So thank you, everybody. Earlier, Mr. Simons talked about the impact to other folks. And this is one of those things that there's two things I think about it from third grade math class. One is what's the numerator and what's the denominator? The other is show your work. One of the things and the challenges in the good Dr. Hanneman's report is that it's a very narrative report. If you get a chance to read it, it's a series of questions and answers, and it's heavily influenced by information the Water Authority is given, again, in a narrative form. But the calculations to come up with the $5 a month per person down in San Diego, that basis for those calculations aren't provided. And a matter of fact, if everybody, just the Water Authority has just under 1 million accounts south of us, say 930,000 or so. If each of them had to pay $5 a month extra, that's $60 a year. That would be, if that'd be $50 million or so. That's way more money than we send down to them total now. So that's the sniff test. I can tell you that $5 a month is clearly inaccurate, because somehow all the money we send down to them, not to mention the expenses that they're going to avoid for the water they have to buy for us, aren't factored in there. So Keene, that's why that number is wrong. And I'm happy to sit down. We've sent a very detailed spreadsheet, and the Jack's CFO here used to work with the Water Authority, understands the data. I think the best thing to do is not to send letters back and forth, because math is math. We should all be able to agree on a number. How much money do we send to the Water Authority today? Here's the dollar. We can give you the invoices. All right. How much does the Water Authority spend to buy the water that we're buying from them that they'll save in the future? That's a number. So we can get to a net value. And Dr. Hanneman had done this before, and he came around $9 million back in June. He then spent apparently a few times in listening to Water Authority, for lack of a better word, propaganda on the matter, and came up with a bigger number, $46 million, which is, more than what we send down there total. So what we would like, and we're hoping that through this process, the ad hoc committee will advise, is that, hey, show your work, folks. Let's get the numbers on the table. We should all agree on how much money Fallbrook and Rainbow send down there, how much money the Water Authority won't have to spend to buy the water for Metropolitan that we're using today. And then you have some residual number, divide that by how many customers down south, then you get to a number. So when we look at it, it's really in the 1% of the Water Authority's total budget. The Water Authority has about an $850 million budget. We're talking about $9 million here, and depending on your numerator or denominator, it might be vary a little bit, but it's roughly 1%, maybe 1.1, maybe 1.2%. Like Jack said, they're planning on raising rates by 7 and 9% a year. So if we were to detach, the people down south, instead of getting a 7% rate increase, we get an 8% rate increase, and one time, and then they would be punished forever with higher and higher rate increases in the Water Authority. So we also have much smaller impacts. If you take those numbers that we just talked about and put it down there, and Jack sent across just last week or week before last calculation indicating they can go down as low as 40 cents, depending on your numerator denominator, and depending on credits that you as the ratepayers here should get. The Water Authority has long promised, as part of the emergency storage project, to be able to serve us. You all pay on your bills in Fallbrook and Rainbow, except for if you're a PSAR customer, but all of our people who aren't on the special ag rate have been paying into the emergency storage project for over 20 years. And guess how much water they can move here to North County through that? Zero. Because there's $40 million in pump stations that have been in the design phase since the mid-90s. Well, actually, they're not even design phase, just conceptual phase, that we've been paying for and hadn't received. That the day we detach, they'll be able to save $40 million. We're expecting a credit for that. They're also sitting on $20 to $25 million a year cash in reserves that's sitting down there, that the Water Authority has built up $260 million in reserves. Of that, a good percentage of it is your money that they're sitting in cash. We should get a credit for that. And so there's also about $250 million in assets that you have paid for over the last 75 years that the other member agencies are continue to enjoy. Our percentage of the total of $3.4 billion in Water Authority assets is about $250 million. There should be some recognition that you all paid. Right now, they're building a big structure in Mission Trails Regional Park. I don't know, how much is that? $50, $80 million project. You're all paying for that. Will you ever see a drop of water go through that or benefit you in any way? No. We should get some credit for that. So all we hope is that if you look at the pizza shop analogy, Jack and I bought a pizza shop together, and we decided, all right, Jack wants to leave, and we say, okay, here's the credit side of our assets. Here's our liabilities. We true those up, and you make that happen. So fairness is the key. And so I'm glad Keene said that to begin with. The other thing about the water authorities, they have options. I know one thing that Keene touched on is the cost of these imported water supplies. Well, just as you all know, down in San Diego, City of San Diego is pursuing their pure water project where they're going to recycle the wastewater and drinking water, which is a great plan. But they recognize that the water authority now has too many take or pay contracts, as in you have to pay for the water. And even if you don't take it, you still have to pay for it, which gets really bad for you. So the city of San Diego pushed through just last month or month before last, an amendment to the long-range financing plan instructing water authority staff to find ways to sell off some of that supply. And as we indicate here, there are ways for the water authority to mitigate the risk of having too much QSA water. And they could just, find somebody else in Metropolitan who wants to buy some supply. Right now might be a pretty good time to make a long-term deal on somebody. One thing, other thing the water authority has been fond of saying repeatedly is that they're worried that we're going to set some precedent, that all the other member agencies are going to run for the hills. Well, the fact is that these huge pipelines that cost billions of dollars, you can't just build a new one. And the closest member agency that's to us is Valley Center. They looked at it. It's way too expensive even for them to come this far north. Not to mention you'd never get the permit to dig a trench down I-15 to put a 48-inch pipeline in. So that's really a non-starter. Nobody else has the capability. We're the only two agencies who have met connection. So next slide, please. So as far as reliability, Eastern did a detailed analysis that was submitted, oh gosh, almost 2 years ago now. And our board did detailed work on this before considering it. Obviously, our number one, both our boards, our number one rule, is my time up? I'm already getting the hook. Jack took way longer. Yeah. Our boards, I can assure you that our boards looked at this very carefully because there's the number one thing that we have is to provide safe and reliable water at the lowest possible cost. That's our mission statement, right? And we have to make sure that we can provide you that water. When we talked to Eastern and looked at the supply portfolios they have, they did a detailed technical study that shows that in any drought scenario, they're going to meet any of the demands we'll have. Now, in these drought scenarios with Metropolitan just increase their drought level, the wholesalers push down to us at the retail level, mandated conservation. And then in certain occasions, like it's happened the last couple of times, the governor does it too. As some of you remember 5 or 6 years ago, we got hit with a 36% cutback requirement, irrespective of supply. All those great QSA supplies did diddly squat benefit for us because we had to go to our growers and everybody else and say, you got to cut 36%, or if we had to face fines from the state. And so, the Eastern through Met's supplies and they also have local supplies to offset some of the impacts of Met's cutbacks. We're not going to, I want to make clear, we're not going to get any of Eastern's local supplies, but the way the allocation system goes, that's factored into Met's cutbacks on them. We will be able to, we would have the exact same impacts if we're here. So it's just a lot cheaper. And Jack indicated, and the big ribbon cutting was just this week for the Santa Margarita project. Congrats! It took 70 years of lawsuits to get you guys there. We're working on it, Rainbow too, but I don't know if I'll see it in my lifetime because we're lawyers. The other thing about this that's a benefit to folks down south, the Water Authority talks about this reliability, how it's a great benefit, and we should have it. Well, if we leave, we all say, and you all choose to say, you know what, that's nice to, but having that extra reliability isn't it good if my grove is dead? And so we're good. We'll just go with Eastern. Even if you guys think that you have this great reliability, well, if they think it's that great, then it even gets better for the folks down south, for the biotech, for the tourism industry, for all the folks down south. Here in the north, we have a different price to reliability relationship. And we believe it's up to you to figure out what that tipping point is. So next slide, please. So, and we were just saying, in October, the governor said, hey, everybody should cut back 15%. It was all over the paper today because they're complaining because people aren't cutting back enough. And my prediction is, unless it starts raining cats and dogs, if we don't have more Octobers in Northern California, we're going to see mandatory 15% cutbacks coming our way post haste early next year. The other thing, like Jack said, that the Colorado River, I don't know if any of you saw 60 Minutes a couple of weeks ago, and anybody's driven out there, it's not in such hot shape. We don't think that the Colorado River is necessarily where the Water Authority gets most of its supply, like 80%. They're all in on that. the Eastern and Metropolitan have a blend of Northern and California and Colorado water. We think that's a better bet to hedge as opposed to going all in on the bathtub ring that is Lake Mead. But I think that the main thing is that you pay all this for reliability, but when push comes to shove, it doesn't get delivered to you. So next slide, please. So the process, we applied in March, it'll be 2 years. It's going through the ad hoc committee as Adam is so ably and I'm sure painfully on his end leading. There's at some point we're hoping March. That sounds great. March would be a great date to have the LAFCO hearing and then an up or down vote from LAFCO. You know, we believe that the law and the facts are on our side to say the LAFCO shouldn't deny it. Obviously, there's no legal reason why this shouldn't happen. It just really comes down to what conditions LAFCO wants to impose. We believe, like Keene said, fairness is the doctrine here, and that if LAFCO would like to stray too far from what the statute says, they should stray on the side of fairness to all involved. The law in the LAFCO doesn't mean the water authority has to be held whole. You know, that they can't ever have a reduction in their revenues. You know, all of us, like Jack, here they sell 20,000 acre feet. Now they're selling 8. That's a big reduction in their revenues. We used to sell almost 40,000 acre feet. Now we're doing about 15. Really difficult to deal with, and it shows up on your bills. One other thing about your bills, it's not just the water costs, it's the fact that in rural areas, each of you is responsible as owners of the system of more pipe than if you live down in Kearney Mesa or in somewhere where there's, you know, 100 people, 100 houses per mile of pipe. Yeah, it's a little cheaper per person. But here, when you've got 4 houses per mile of pipe, that cost to maintain each mile of pipe gets split amongst fewer people. So next slide, please. So what the Water Authority do? Well, you know, I've been around the Water Authority for a couple decades, and they always lead with a lawyer. So the first thing they did, well, after sending us a Public Records Act request, was to authorize $1 million of some of that money's yours, about 6% of that's your money, to fight us. There was also a lawsuit against both Fallbrook and Rainbow by the Otay Water District that appeared to us to be in close coordination with the Water Authority, challenging us on environmental issues that somehow by buying the exact same water through the same pipelines from the same reservoirs, from the same treatment plant, we're going to impact the San Joaquin, Sacramento Bay Delta. Completely nuts. The lawsuit was dispatched very rapidly. But they also passed a resolution, and I want to here to tell you that there's #1 thing on the Water Authority's resolution. They're really worried about you. They're concerned about you. They want to make sure that there's no harm to you. The reality is that, to me, I think you all are capable of looking at the information and making the choice on your own. But they want to make sure that these fiends at Fallbrook and Rainbow don't confuse you on something. They're really worried about their water bills going up, whereas we've been saying we've been paying too much for decades here for pipelines and processes that we don't benefit from. And yet now they're worried about it, that their subsidy is going to go away. Like I said, they don't want us to negatively impact the environment. It's a nutty thing. It's a concept that only a lawyer who wants to use the California Environmental Quality Act to block something would know and use in the situation. And we're confident that our boards went through a full CEQA process on it, and we're confident that LAFCO will affirm that. They're also worried about their voting power at Metropolitan. So the Water Authority is a member agency at Metropolitan, and they have certain voting rights. They have about 17.4% of the voting rights up there. But the problem with that is that the Met's voting structure, the Water Authority's voting rights are based on property valuation. They're not based on purchases. They're not based on number of meters or sales volumes. It's based on what's the assessed value in your service area. The last time I checked, all of you own that assessed valuation. And the way I see it, that vote is yours. And if through this process, you decide to take our total, which would be 0.2%, so they would go from 17.4 to 17.2. If you decide that you'd rather have Eastern use that 0.2% to further your interest at Met, then that's up to you. It's your vote, not the Water Authority's vote to lose. They don't own any vote. It's owned by the property holders here. And as Keene said, they're trying to do a countywide vote. You know, the law is very clear. It's a statute, it's written, and I'm confident that the LAFCO's council will read the statute just like we do that says it shall be held in the regions that are leaving. So They also, and a funny thing, Jack and I had a couple of interesting meetings. They formed a little ad hoc committee because we had been complaining. We actually went to the Water Authority prior to filing anything with LAFCO and said, hey, let's sit down and talk about this. I'm sure there's some middle ground. Here's what the law says. Maybe we can work something out. We don't want to have this whole spectacle. They said, no, forget you, and had their lawyers call us. And then after, this is about, I want to say about 8 months ago, they said, hey, we're going to form an ad hoc committee that'll meet with you guys and maybe we can work it out. And they called a settlement meeting so we could go talk to them. Well, it was one thing they came to talk to us about. Their big thing was, hey, you know what? We'll help you get some loans to help pay for some projects. And we're like, well, no. Loans aren't what we want. We want to save millions of dollars a year, you know, up to $10 million a year collectively that we're sending you now that we get zero benefit from. And so we found it to be kind of a slap in the face. So we didn't have any more meetings. We also have a PR campaign they started up here called Stronger Together, that they want to make sure everybody knows that we're stronger together, that you're better off in having your rural agricultural interests tied to biotech tourism and urban efforts down south. I don't know. I talked to a lot of people in North County, and the interests of people up here are different than the people in the urban areas as they are in East County to urban areas. It's different. And I think sometimes the people in urban areas don't understand that. So next slide. So again, this is about fairness. We don't want to, we're open to talking to the Water Authority about a fair resolution. At one point, they said we need to pay $1.2 billion to leave. They filed that in writing to LAFCO, $1.2 billion, which is bonkers. I mean, we don't know where they got that number. That's why I keep saying, show your work on that, you know, because we don't use the infrastructure yet we pay for it, and that the increasing water costs. I know where's my friend? There's Rick. I know Rick calls me all the time, talk about it, and other growers do as well, and to say, hey, this is, you know, this is not sustainable, and we're attuned to things. There's some folks down there, the county supervisors in the urban areas, are very concerned about climate change, as we all are, because it's impacting everybody. And what we offer the county as a benefit here is a huge carbon sink. And that all of you that run grows, your trees, by your investment in the water to keep those trees going, are pulling out hundreds of thousands of metric tons of carbon. And that is a benefit, not just to us here, but to the whole county. You know, a lot of those exhaust fumes going up I-15, converted into guacamole. I mean, how much more can anybody want? And maybe we just say none of you folks down south can have any of that guacamole, but you know, that's how can you ever do better with carbon than that? And so, you know, $7 to $10 million a year, that's our forecast now. The Water Authority, if they do 7 to 9% rate increases, that number's going up, because then we're going to have to pass that through. And so the potential savings are much higher. And like I said, the impacts to folks down south, it's not $5 a month, respectfully, Keene, and we can sit down and go through the math on that. It's more on the line of 50 cents a month. So with that, I think that the next slide just restates some of what was in a Voice of San Diego op-ed, that our ratepayers have been paying more for their water than they should, and it's not right, and it needs to end. And so that concludes our comments. And have you got a microphone so people online can hear the questions? Oh, we'll just take here. You take that.
Yeah. In a minute, we're going to open it up to question and answer. But before we do, I'd like to invite somebody up who wants to speak on this issue, why it's important to our communities. Many of you may know, probably know who Jennifer Jeffries is. For those of you who don't, she was superintendent of the Fallbrook Elementary School District for 10 years. She has a doctorate in education from USD. She was a faculty member at Cal State San Marcos, and currently she's on the board of the Fallbrook Regional Health District, and she's lived in Fallbrook since 1988.
Thank you, friend. Wow, this is Fallbrook. Reason why I came in 88 and I stayed in 88. You come for the place, you stay for the people. Well, I've been a ratepayer for 33 years. I've lived in San Diego for 70 years, and I have benefited from the collaboration with San Diego Water Authority, no doubt about it. The leaders of our 2 water districts have initiated a water leap effort in the form of the detachment, and it's serious business. Since 1944, San Diego County has been united around common approach to water quality and availability. And I'm a big fan of collaborative efforts. That's my on button. But those efforts have to be fair value in proportion to contribution. The collaboration must stand the test of fairness to all. I didn't know that was going to be the theme tonight, but fairness to all. When it comes to our local ratepayers, this no longer passes that test. The significant point of unfair contribution is evident in the millions of dollars paid by us for infrastructure projects that do not provide commensurate benefit to the ratepayers. Think desal plant. Ratepayers have also endured annual increases. We all know that. Our ag community is decimated. So these accumulated effects over time have rendered the collaboration with SDWA illogical. It's illogical. In short, the juice no longer is worth the squeeze for ratepayers. So we've got the pipes and we have a new dance partner. We have to be prepared to come out in droves in favor of this, because it's not going to be easy. San Diego Water Authority wants us to stay in the game with them. I can understand that. But we've got to take up time, energy, and effort now as residents to become knowledgeable about this essential service and its future in our communities. The opposition is no match to our efforts, because we know the detachment is best for us, businesses, homeowners, agriculture, and renters. That which was useful over the decades needs to be adjourned. We don't have to be mean or mad. We don't. We can be thankful and gracious for the past collaborative successes and move into the future on separate paths. And now is the time. I hope from this day forward, until LAFCO decides whether we can decide our fate or not, you will join me to prepare ourselves to say what we believe is right, fair, and good for our future. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jennifer. Are there any questions? I'm going to bring the mic to you.
Hi, John Frandell, avocado farmer with just planted 225 trees because I believe in this, creating some good air. But Tommy, one thing that you guys didn't mention that has always bothered me, and you correct me if I'm wrong, but I understand that San Diego County Water Authority's debt, this huge debt they have, is not even amortized, that they've made decision to only pay the interest on this massive debt. To anybody who owns a home or any type of debt, that kind of management is not in the best interest and is a reflection of how they treated us.
You can always count on John Frandell, right?
I'm going to keep Tom out of trouble for being a fiduciary on it. So
I'll tell you tomorrow morning.
yeah, if you talk to him in private.
No, there is, the water authorities has very complex, multiple billions in debt, and they refinance them in different ways that are complex for everyone to understand, but there are some of the bonds that are currently being paid interest only at this time. But it's a big plan to get it done at some point in the future. Jackson wants to get me out of trouble.
Yeah, and I just say, LAFCO, that would be one way for LAFCO to look at it would be, is this some portion of debt associated with facilities that were just built for Fallbrook and Rainbow that Fallbrook and Rainbow should be responsible for. But when you look at it, there isn't infrastructure that was just built for Fallbrook and Rainbow. So fortunately, it looks like that, that obligation to pay for debt isn't in the mix with the LAFCO application. Now there's another talk about paying for water that we buy when water is available and don't get when there's a drought, but that's a separate, that's sort of the focus right now at LAFCO for cost to lead.
Hi, my name is Catherine and I reside in Fallbrook. I became a homeowner, a first-time homeowner this year. And my question is regarding the investments that were made by San Diego County Water Authority that contributed to that graph where the prices diverge from Eastern. did we have any say at the time those investments were being made? Or were those out of our control? In other words, did we neglect to speak up for our best interests as
Well,
a member of
You
that?
can ask anyone down at the Water Authority, when Jack and I both serve on the board, and we object to lots of things, but Jack has about 2% of the vote and Rainbow has about 4% of the vote. And if essentially the Water Authority goes to the city of San Diego and a handful of other agencies, the way the voting percentage goes, they pass whatever they want. The more rural and especially North County agencies have been in the opposition of many things there. And so the other thing you have to remember that when you're a member of the Water Authority Board, you're supposed to not only represent your agency, but also the board in general. If we had to vote no on everything that didn't bring water directly to our districts, we have to vote no on everything that happens there, like, hey, they want to remodel a bathroom or something like that. But on the big ones are the emergency storage project, which in general are at the time, so a lot of people favored. This was in the 90s after the big early 91 drought. And had they actually built the infrastructure so that we could benefit from it, that we've been waiting for almost a quarter century for, might be a different story. But at this point, the water costs have spiraled so far out of control that we're like, you know what, you can just keep that and save yourself the money and we'll just buy it from someone else.
Yeah, and you know, another big cost driver we talked about was the desal plant, and people often ask, why aren't there desal plants up and down the coast of California? And the answer for that is the water is very expensive. So it's about twice as much as your other supply. So the reason for that is if your water bills doubled, our water demand would drop in such a way that you wouldn't need the desal plants anymore. So if you just threatened everyone with building them, that would get you part of the way there. Our district, and it was the general manager before me, Brian Brady, was one of the leading voices against it, because he was saying the cost benefit, he said countywide, you really need to think about this as a member of the Water Authority, but especially for Fallbrook and Rainbow, where they talk about, well, this is just $5 a month on average. Well, that's if you were, using a very small amount of water, you lived in a, condo in downtown San Diego. You as a new homeowner, I'm sure saw your first water bill and was like, man, this is a lot more than I was anticipating. That's the problem here. I mean, that's part of what we're trying to deal with is, it's one of your top expenses. You've got your mortgage and then your water bill. And so it's really top line item for everyone. So yes, some of those we did speak out against, but like Tom said, we're not the voice driving the Water Authority. Our voice isn't the strongest one. One of the arguments they've made is if you move to Eastern, you won't have people sitting on there from Fallbrook and Rainbow. That's correct, except our ratepayers would vote for one of those 5 members, right? So one of those 5 members would be the voice of this community. To us, that's a better situation than us just pretending to matter, right? So I'll go and talk. I mean, that's great. You guys have me there, but does it really mean anything to you? So that's sort of the perspective on that.
Hi, my name is Richard Bruck. I live in Bonsall. I might have come in a little late and missed something. Did you explain the difference between the infrastructure at Eastern, how their expenditures relate to the infrastructure expenses for the district we have now, and what benefit we'll get out of a decrease in those expenses? Or will they just build an infrastructure that we don't benefit in also? I just want to know that because I really like to hear what Eastern's position is on that.
So the beauty of this is that within Eastern service area, they have 2 rates, a wholesale rate. They have 2 different wholesale rates, one for agencies that use their infrastructure, one for agencies that don't. So Rancho California Water, which is Temecula, and Rainbow and Fallbrook would be the agencies that only use Metropolitan's infrastructure. Now, Metropolitan's pipelines, the cost of that pipeline and all the pipelines in Met's system is baked into Met's per acre foot price. The Water Authority spent 10 years suing them over that price, but it is what it is. And so Eastern could build more infrastructure in their service area, but we wouldn't pay for any of that. We would only pay the Met price. Now, Met will have to deal with other things in the future. There's the Bay Delta pipelines that'll have to be built, but that'll be spread across, 19 million people in Southern California. And not like here in San Diego where it's spread across a small number of people. Jack, is that?
Yeah, the only other thing I'd add to it is one of the big differences with Eastern with the Water Authority, whether Fallbrook wants to participate in a supply project or not, once the Water Authority votes for it, we're in it, right? We're paying for it. The nature and the agreement with Eastern is we could, if we wanted to, if we said, hey, there's a local project that we want to participate in, we could participate by developing an agreement and framework with Eastern, and they've said, hey, this is something we're willing to do, but that project would have to make sense to us. So that's the difference, is that we're not locked into everything because they recognize the unique nature of how we get water versus how it is with the water authority, where we're all treated the same. Yeah, yeah, I mean, oh, yeah, and I mean, ultimately, those will be decisions, you know, you'll hopefully, as our ratepayers get to make is does this make sense? You know, is this make sense? And we think it does, but that's something ultimately that, you know, the ratepayers will get to view the pros and cons and decide.
I'll bring you the microphone.
Yes, hello. My name is Baron Bruckheimer. I'm a business owner. I've just been here for 12 years, quite frankly. Other than to tell me that perhaps the way to save water or do whatever I have to do as far as cooperate with you to lower the cost, how can a corporation such as mine and large scale help in the situation to drive prices down and so on and so forth? Because I'm willing to volunteer and volunteer my services.
Well, I mean, as the districts, at some point when this comes to an election, districts can't participate and advocate any way up or down. We don't know what right now it's not even on a LAFCO agenda. There's no proposal from LAFCO to go on any ballot. So there's nothing we can say positive or negative, but even when it does, we're barred by law from spending expenditures to advocate. We can inform, but not advocate. At some point, and is what happens in any kind of ballot measure or thing like that, concerned citizens like yourselves get together and form committees to you know, put yard signs up or whatever happens, you know. That's something that we under law cannot be involved in, but we can provide information, but we can't advocate. Rick?
I have a suggestion: buy more California avocados.
Yeah, there you go.
My name's Rick Carey. I've got a grove that went in 1958, water meter down in Gopher Canyon. I've had it for 25 years, not since 58. Where's the gentleman just planted trees? Let's go to Vegas.
Oh, John Frandell, yeah.
Because I just turned down 250 trees that were ordered 2 years in the making from Brokaw Nursery, because I think the glass is half empty. I also had to take out 400 certified organic Hass trees in the aftermath of the Delta smelt decision, where we got 30% mandatory water cutbacks. And that wasn't a real drought. That was a judicial drought. That was a judge cut off 1/3 of the water to Southern California. So I don't see the future as being too bright. There's been a lot of discussion about voting here. I also spent 30 years in the Navy, so I believe in the Constitution, but I can't vote. I do not live in the district. I've been bringing that up for 15 years. You can't get that changed. I can tell you there's 4 groves that touch me. One's 32 acres, it's all gone. My neighbor is 60 acres. He lives in Orange County. I have another neighbor right behind me, 12 acres, managed by Henry Avocado. Uses lots of water, 4 acre feet. If you know how Henry manages, where's Charlie? But there's 100 acres around me that has no vote. And I think that's a problem. And that's a rule that needs to be addressed. If we're paying, and my water bill last month was $6,000. My 2-inch water meter that's been in the ground since 58, well, it just got changed. Where's Robert? Thank you. I got a
Right,
nice
you got a new one up there, Rick.
I'm $618 a month for standby charges. It's not sustainable. So eat more avocados and make sure it's got a California label on it, because the California crop last year was 300 million pounds. Mexico brought in 3.1 billion pounds last year. We're getting crushed not only by costs locally and not having a voice on some of the things that are being done to us, but the importers, and a lot of them are the packing houses that are headquartered right here, participate in that import. They don't care where the fruit comes from. They make money. So
Yeah, Rick, and just to touch on that, under the County Water Authority Act and the elections code provisions for this type of action, it's just registered voters within our districts. There are, and I'm sure King could give you 15 more minutes on it if you want it, there are certain LAFCO processes and procedures that can take the people who are not registered voters in a jurisdiction but are registered landowners and based on their percentage of assessed valuation. I won't get into protest proceedings, King, but I know you'd love me to. I know. Anybody else have any other questions? There we go.
My name's Dave. I had a question that might explain why the difference between the $5 and the 50 cents. I know.
It's the show your work part. We're hoping to resolve that. The $5 one just came out, I think, in the last several days from LAFCO.
One thing I didn't hear you guys mention was the property tax, because there is a certain amount of property tax that goes to San Diego that I assume we wouldn't be sending to Riverside if we moved to Eastern. And then there's also taxes on the water bill, of course, so.
Yeah, so there's a couple things in that that I think come out of it. So our total revenue that we've all agreed on, I think, is about $40 million. So when you add everything up, that the money that the Water Authority gets from Fallbrook and Rainbow, that ends up being about $40 million total. Now, our perspective is if we leave, right, you're going to get less money because we're not buying water, and there's some other fees you're going to get, but you're not going to buy the same amount of Met water. So they buy a certain amount of water from Metropolitan. The net impact from them is reduced revenue, reduced Met purchases, right? And so that's the math that came up in the 11, maybe $16 million range. What the Water Authority did, I think, in their math, they said, well, no, if you leave now, we're going to have too much take or pay water. And so now we're going to have commitments that we can't continue to keep. The problem with that is if anyone's looked at the last 10 years of water demand forecasting, the only thing you know for sure is we've been wrong, and we've been wrong by a lot. Right. So, 20 years ago, the prediction from the Water Authority, regional demands would be about 1 million acre feet. They're half that. Right. So if they think, well, we've got this nailed to the margin of error of Fallbrook and Rainbow, what that means is you already have a problem. You're just unwilling to recognize it. So that's a large difference of them basically saying, no, we've got just enough. And then if we peg it, but with you leave now, we've got all these commitments that are more than we can handle. Our stance is that means you already have a problem, and there are ways to mitigate that. The denominator side is really about how many things are you dividing this among, right? And I think what LAFCO is looking at is connections, right? So how many connections does the Water Authority have? But the problem with that is, say downtown San Diego, a connection could be a high rise that serves 600 people. So that's usually in the water industry, what we use is equivalent meter units, which is sort of breaking it down to what is the equivalent meter unit is like one family, single family residence, or in a multifamily unit, how many people are in that unit. And so that's some of the differences. That 50 cents is that sort of a per household number. If you use connections, it's sort of ambiguous number. How much it's $5 per a Qualcomm stadium or a apartment building. So it's harder to make sense of that. And I think that's part of it. The other way we've said is you could take population. I think they serve total of about 3.3 million people. So you could also take it and divide it by population or use a per household number to get to a household number, because that's what it means. What is it per household? So that's sort of the difference in where that number is coming from. One is what is really the net impact and how does that look? Two, what are you dividing it by?
I'm going to bring you the microphone.
I'm Brad. I live here in Fallbrook. By the way, Rick, good hearing your voice, man. Hope you're doing well. 2 questions. Is there a time frame for this to end? Or is this going to go on for years and years and years and years? First question. And then my second question is, I thought I heard you say earlier that there was an exit strategy when the whole San Diego Water Authority came together with all these agencies. Is that correct?
Yeah, there's a Water Authority Act that describes how to leave.
So if there is, why are you spending so much time dealing with them if there already has an exit strategy? Why don't you just follow whatever the heck
Ask Gene.
that
Those
says?
are both Gene's questions.
I mean, isn't that common sense for heaven's sakes?
Those are Gene's questions.
The problem, if I may, and I'm not going to stand on any pedestal, is there's so much bureaucratic, you know what, in the state, everybody's leaving because you don't follow what you said you were going to do, you ain't doing. And it's frustrating, very,
No,
very frustrating.
Fair enough,
So
although.
there you go.
You know, it's important to, before we talk about the timeline and Adam can go into the details of the ad hoc, bureaucracy may have a bad tone to it, but it's intended, right, to make sure that things check out, that there's this independent process. So I hear you and others saying this process, Fallbrook Rainbow submit a proposal to LAFCO 2 years ago. Maybe it's longer at this point. I'm not sure. 2 years, right before COVID. Hey, this is a big lift. It involves a lot of people right now. And again, Adam can get into the details. We are winding down our ad hoc committees involvement in the process specific to looking at those 3 core issues that there is obviously some difference of opinion, rate impacts and potential exit fees. At that point, I am assuming it'd be fair that Andy and the commission will start to take up this item in 22. I'm ballparking March or April. But let's manage expectations. When we bring this to the commission, whatever side, and it may be these 2 gentlemen, maybe it's the water authority, there's going to be who's ever on the other side of whatever conclusion or thought that the commission has is going to bring a ton of paper. If we're generating 1,000 pages of documents in each letter now, I can only imagine what it will be when the commission's actually taking it up. So yes, it's bureaucratic, but that's a good thing. Obviously, there's not a lot of fans of bureaucracy here, but I assure you, it works out in the end. Yeah.
So,
My name
the
is.
answer is we are hopeful there will be an end at some point.
Bureaucracy is a process, right? So the question I had was regarding reliability. I know that there was some IID purchases by the County Water Authority, but what's not mentioned is that the Metropolitan has been purchasing up tens of thousands of acres in the Imperial Valley. And even people in the Imperial Valley are a little bit like, whoa, what's going on? And I believe they're buying water rights.
Yeah, so there's really is, so the thing to understand is everyone here is essentially, part of the water authority. We're also part of Metropolitan. So we're already part of that whole thing. As a member of a Metropolitan member agency, when you invest in reliability, what you're trying to say is when Met does a cutback, what can I do to buffer some against that cutback? That's sort of the decision you're making, is you've already got Metropolitan in those investments. So what you're trying to do is buffer a little bit more against that Metropolitan cutback. Now, the Water Authority will tend to go back to the 90s and say, well, this is what happened in the 90s. And in the 90s, Southern California was not really prepared for that drought, right? No one had really made all the investments that they had. Demands were very high. Everyone was really relying on Northern California, Colorado River. We hadn't made the local investments. It's not the 90s anymore today. So water demands have dropped significantly. Met has invested in a lot of storage and other resources. And so to us is we're sort of trying to solve the wrong problem in a lot of ways too, because cost of water is going to go up. Demands to us are going to keep going down. There's still a lot of demand, especially if you look in Fallbrook and Rainbow. If we're with the Water Authority, that projection on water demands, there's a point in which lawn becomes not worth the cost of lawn. And there's still a lot of lawn out there. If it's costing you $400 a month, you're going to cut back on your lawn. So that's part of our perspective on it is, Met has invested a lot in reliability. We have the ability, if it's a 15% Met cutback, right? it's more than likely we're going to be in this situation we're in now, where the state is also saying, hey, we're going to mandate some water use, outdoor water use restrictions. As soon as we do that in Fallbrook and Rainbow, as soon as we say, hey, you have to cut back on your outdoor water use, we see significant reduction in demand. It's not as hard for us to get those demand reductions because of the nature of our water use. If, for example, city of San Diego, you may go, hey, 15% is drastic, right? So it's worth a cost to try to cut that in half. And so we're going to invest money in these other supplies. But what's happening is sort of the reverse of that, is we pay for that water when it's available, but then we're still always asked to do that cut. And so that's why, for us, the Met cutback and being in the same boat as essentially with that cutback isn't as drastic as it might be for other agencies in other areas. It's our perspective and sort of our board's perspective on it. Soleil works here, but that wasn't a plant. That was actually, he also lives in Bonsall. So
I'm Lynn. I'm an avocado dragon fruit farmer, but as a Rainbow customer, what kind of discounts are we going to see on our water rates if indeed this deal with Eastern goes ahead?
Yeah, so we're projecting right now, and of course, we don't know what this exit fee will be, so it's hard for us to say. But if it follows the County Water Authority Act, we expect everyone's rates to go down. The reality is that right now, under the PSAR rate, if you're on the ag rate, the water is in the $1,400 an acre foot range. We'll be able to buy our water from Eastern for about $1,200. So all of our water will be cheaper than that. And depending on exactly what the provisions are, we expect to, and we're also working with Fallbrook to have a local ag program to where that, just like you do now, you agree to a bigger cutback in the future cutbacks for a cheaper price. So we can increase the reliability for our municipal and residential customers who want more reliability locally. This is without anything else. And also for our farmers who will choose to stump some trees in every 5 years if you've got an older grove, that might be something you're gonna do anyway. We'll set those up, but until we know exactly what it is, I can't say, because we don't know what if they say we had to pay $1.2 billion to leave, I don't know, but we do expect them to go down. The other thing about it that's important though, and I do this when I'm talking to my Rainbow customers, how many of you had a water main break on your street? And all right, here we go. And we've got a lot of Fallbrook's going to celebrate 100 years in 2 years here. And Rainbow is about 75. We've got a lot of infrastructure and very few people to pay for it. Right now, your ratepayer dollars are going down to build a big structure in Mission Trails Regional Park. Right now, we would rather take that money and replace the pipeline on your street because it's rotted out, it's high pressure, and it needs to get done. It's impossible for us to do that because if we can't get some relief on the funds that we're spending money on other people's pipelines to replace your pipelines, we're gonna have to raise the rates even higher. So it'll be the water authority rate increases, and then we've got to fix that pipe at some point. I mean, they don't last forever. So that's an important perspective.
Yeah, and I think when we looked at it from Fallbrook, as long as LAFCO doesn't impose something that's sort of punitive, is sort of the water authority target is to make it, punitive so that it just doesn't work for us. So that even though it's clear the water costs less, that offset is so significant that it really makes it impossible. If what comes out of LAFCO is reasonable, our target was hopefully to be able to do some sort of small decrease and then be able to hold rates flat, right? I mean, that was really our target. If we don't get, if we're not able to get through this process, it's at 7 to 9%. And so some of it is selfish because I don't want everyone back here for the rate hearing. Again, I'd much rather be able to, do something that's much more manageable. So that's really, part of the driver is really being able to do something and maybe have probably the first rate decrease in, the 100-year history of the district, and then really be able to do a long-term, a 3 to 5, 3-year sort of no increase type of thing.
It seems like there's no mental enema for cerebral constipation. And what the gen up in front had to say, you got subjective semantics, pencil whipping, mathematics, need for a glossary of terms. How in the hell can LAFCO adjudicate anything when nobody speaks. Straight down, like everybody else.
Well, I think it's difficult, you know, LAFCO, and I work a lot with LAFCO on a variety of topics. They operate, if you ever want to have some good bedside reading, get out the Cortese-Knox-Hertzberg Local Government Reorganization Act of 2000. It's very complex and it takes special people to do it because the legislature, through a very lengthy process that took, and it's been refined over the years, crafted something to make local government orderly. And it's difficult because there's lots, if you ever look around it, when you go to the ballot and you see all these different districts you're voting on, some of you didn't know existed. Somebody's got to keep track of all that. Who's in which district and what are they providing the services, and making sure that districts every 5 years, they're going to check in on us and say, are you providing the services in a safe and effective way for your customers? It's an important role for us. Unfortunately, it goes unnoticed by lots of people. Some of us deal with it on a daily basis, and not just on this matter, but Jack and I are both elected by our peers to the Special District Advisory Committee. It's an important role. I wish it had a higher profile. I wish the law wasn't so obtuse and difficult to read, and using terminology that is very difficult for lay people who don't deal with it every day to deal with. But it is what it is. Sacramento is what it is. They make up the rules. We just have to play by them.
And I want to, thank Keen for coming here. It's not it's a hard enough environment for us that are our own little local government in Fallbrook Public Utility District. That generally isn't always appreciated. And the people of Fallbrook form the Fallbrook Public Utility District really to serve them. They do have an important job, and so there is some time involved. It would be easier if, what we had hoped is that if us and the Water Authority were able to kind of work something out and come to LAFCO together. You don't want to have a fight in front of LAFCO. That's not, they're more often to kind of help make sure that, hey, these things are organized orderly. If you do have a fight in front of LAFCO, it tends to drag out, and so that's just part of the nature of it. We're going to both have different points of view and they have to come in the middle of it. So it's part of the process, and they're really there to make sure, local districts don't do something that really endangers their community, provides it so they don't have service. That's part of the role they have. So it is important. It just happens to be this one. They're in the middle of something that is a bit of a sore subject here. And, the Water Authority, I think, sometimes misses how this gets perceived within our community in terms of their reaction to it.
There's a lot of misperception going on today in government and by who. But anyway, I hope that this doesn't drag on that long.
You and me both.
With that much brain power being wasted and money, that maybe we could have taken the money and built onto the Carlsbad desalinization, or you get the idea?
Yeah, we just don't have $1 billion of your dollars to put into something like that. But if you've got $1 billion, we can talk about it. Rick, make it quick.
Honestly,
For those of you who know Rick.
This is November 10th. I just picked this up at Grangetto's today. It's Ag Alert. You can probably go to it. First page. Proposed ballot initiative seeks new water investments. For all the leaders in here, elected, unelected, committee members, I highlighted this. It says California still hasn't built projects approved by voters, for those of you that can vote, in the last major water bond in 2014. So to go to the bureaucracy thing, we're tired of it. We need to move this thing forward and not spend, how much have we spent in fees for LAFCO to just study this? Hundreds of thousands, I believe. We're dying on the vines here, folks. We don't have another season to get this done.
Yep, I know that Keen is committed, and I know our friends at the Water Authority wanted to drag this out further, but I think LAFCO has told them that, it's time to move to the next phase.
Yeah, and I think, to sort of take concern for everyone's time here, and, especially really appreciate Keen coming up and giving that update to everyone. So, I think we'll sort of work to wrap it up here. Oh, do the drawing. Yeah, the other thing just to note is, so if you have other comments You can come, you've got, a lot of the board members are here. You've seen, they're good to kind of get your comments through. Also, I know LAFCO will, take input, so if you have thoughts for, against, otherwise, LAFCO is a good place to get those in. And then it's going to be very important, obviously, as this comes to the commission, that, this group is able to speak. If you're for it, against it, how you feel about it. This really won't happen and be successful without support of the community. That's what's going to make this. Tom and I being for it, our board members being for it, that's not going to move the needle on this. It's really going to take others. If you are for it or against it, it's going to be important that you're there and you speak.
And we'll be around for a few more minutes. Anybody has any questions, we can talk offline. But right now, Noel wants to give away some Proteas.
Yes, so I'm going to pick you as a volunteer. Can you choose a name? You choose a name. Barbara Funwell. Is Barbara here? Must be present to win, yeah. Adam Wolf. You're welcome. Okay, and we have one more. Cindy Triesh. All right. Your lucky day. Did we have any more questions? Anyone? Okay. One more question.
Hello?